On a rather challenging passage for a single-handed 72-year-old sailor returning from the Scillies, I show the setup on Thalmia, including the sail management and auto steering arrangements, but it includes some great sailing footage. The forecast for Friday the 7th of July was pretty bad, so it had to be plan B. We were up early on the morning of the 6th of July 2023 and I took Ruth ashore in the dinghy. She was flying home on the Isles of Scilly Skybus service. I stowed the dinghy on deck and weighed anchor at 7:15 and motored over Tresco Flats to Watermill Cove. Here I had a second breakfast and then finished preparing the boat for my return to the mainland. This included fitting my jackstay lines along the side of the deck and digging out my safety harness. I left Watermill Cove at 9:20. I put the main up with one reef and the Genoa with several rolls left on the forestay. Out past the Eastern Isles it was very lumpy, which was probably exacerbated by the currents that run around the islands. When clear of the islands, the sea state eased a little, but closing in on Wolf Rock, the wind having backed then to the south, we had the wind on the beam, still at around 18 to 20 knots, gusting 22 or more, but with a swell of 2 meters or more at times from the stern quarter. For the first time that I can remember, I had my safety lines attached to a secure point, even in the cockpit. Fortunately, I didn't need to go up on deck, although the jackstays were in place had that been necessary. On Thalmia, the Genoa is a furling headsail. It's quite new, and with a foam insert in the luff, it keeps a reasonable shape even when furled, and for most of the time it was furled to the equivalent of a second or third reefing point. I can, if necessary, control the reefing of the main from the cockpit, which is a real bonus for a solo sailor. On Thalmia, I set this up in the first winter after acquiring the boat to replicate what I had had on a previous boat, a Sadler 26. The other key component of managing Thalmia single-handed is the excellent auto helm, an EV100 tiller pilot by Ray Marine. I had this fixed early on in my ownership of Thalmia because the ST2000 it came with was not up to the job, except in light winds and flat seas. The EV100 took me around Britain in 2021, and on this occasion it steered Thalmia for over 9 hours in some quite demanding conditions. I have to admit that towards the end the battery was getting down towards 50%, and so for the last hour or so I ran the motor on tickover to improve the level of charge. It had been mostly cloudy for the crossing, so the solar panel on the coach roof had not produced enough charge. Most of the time I use the auto helm in wind vane mode, so that after trimming the sails for a particular wind angle, the auto helm will keep the boat at that angle to the wind. I find that I can adjust the angle from time to time to maintain a good course to my destination, but I know that if there is a shift in the wind, the boat will shift course as well. Rounding Lizard Point, there are some early changes to the currents close inshore, but I was too early to take advantage of these, and in any case it was a lee shore in difficult conditions, so I stayed well offshore. It was still very turbulent even out there, but a larger boat that sailed closer inshore was bucking even more than I was, and I stayed level with them around the point. After the Lizard, the sea state eased and I sailed at 140 degrees off the true wind past Blackhead and the Manacles Buoy into the Helford River, where I picked up a visitor's mooring buoy. I spent a couple of nights in the Helford to rest and wait for fair winds to continue my return passage.
On the 9th of July, I set off with just one reef in the main, but a full genoa in some 10 to 12 knots of wind, and having some current with me at 5.5 to 6 knots boat speed. I was sailing in a southerly, force 3 to 4 and less than 1 metre swell at 6.5 to 7 knots speed over the ground.
A mother and a baby in the college wall, in the concrete grave. You never want to fight against the river law. Nobody rules the way. You know the night when the lazy wind is wailing around the cutting south. Single-handed sailor.
Approaching Salcombe, the wind dropped to a force 3 and I shook out the reef in the main. Two miles off the entrance to Salcombe, the swell and waves began piling up as the water depth reduced. Crossing the bar, there were big rollers and breaking waves, and I surfed and slewed until over the bar. I dropped the main inside the harbour. It was too rough outside. It was Merlin Rocket Week in Salcombe, and it was very lively conditions for them as well. I was dodging them on my way in, and they were dodging me when I was on the mooring. One of them hit my anchor with their boom, but no damage was done to Thalmere or to the Merlin. The final passages to Dartmouth and the Exe were relatively calm, although there were some fairly rough conditions around Prawle Point. It was what some have referred to as a washing machine ride. By comparison, Start Point was relatively tame. I passed Start Point close inshore at the start of the flood tide.
And drifting, just like a ship out on the sea.
In Dartmouth, I contacted the Darthaven Marina and was found a finger berth. A strong current runs through the marina on the flood and even more so on the ebb.
Well, I ain't got nobody.
As advised, I entered the berth at slack water. The Navionics app is excellent at showing the detail of the currents in the river at this point at all states of the tide.
If my baby would only take me back again.
Slipping lines at low water, I sailed back to the X. With full main and full genoa in a force 4 to 5 from the southwest, but on a slight to moderate sea. I jibed downwind initially at 140 degrees off the true wind, but later the wind veered and the wind angle eventually gave me a good course direct to the X fairway.
Give you all my money. Tell me what more can I do? Give you all my money. Tell me what more can I do? You is a sweet little girl, but I swear you couldn't be true. I'm drifting and drifting, just like a ship out on the sea. I'm drifting and drifting, just like a ship out on the sea.
The only small hiccup I had was that on approaching the X, a small stainless steel pin that secures the ram of the autohelm to the deck had become detached, and I had to hand steer the last short distance into the X and onto my mooring. I'm glad this didn't happen on the crossing from the Scillies to the Helford.